The first thing I heard wasn't my name. It was my sister, rehearsing mine, before my brilliant sister shares her insights. Sienna's voice floated through my mother's dining room like a ribbon, practiced and polished, the way she's been trained to speak since we were kids. I stood in the doorway, my portfolio slipping, pages fanning across the hardwood, like white flags. Only, I wasn't surrendering tonight. My name is Lena Hart. I'm an economist based in Chicago. I build funding models that move resources where they actually change lives. I do not need a chaperone, a translator, or a prettier echo. Mom sat at the head of the table, watching Sienna gesture beside the old china cabinet. Not too formal, Mom coached, but established the right tone. The room smelled like lemon polish, and a little bit of triumph that didn't belong to me. I had come early for what was supposed to be a small family dinner to celebrate my keynote next week at the Global Relief Alliance Gala. Apparently, it had turned into dress rehearsal for Sienna's introduction of me. "There you are," Mom said when she finally noticed me. Her smile tightened before it warmed into something that looked like love if you didn't know better. "You're early enough to hear the plan," I answered, crouching to collect my pages. Economic projections, pilot outcomes, impact curves. They had taken months of work and more than a few sleepless nights. There is no introduction. Not by Sienna. Not by anyone. Sienna's expression flickered with pity that always smelled like perfume. "Lena, you freeze when it's a big room. Let me warm the crowd, and you can focus on the brainy parts." I stood, tucking the pages into my portfolio. I won't be introduced as someone who needs warming up. I was invited for my work. I'm delivering my work. The front door opened. My father swept in with a bottle of sparkling wine and a familiar confidence that bent rooms around him. "Traffic," he announced, kissing the air beside Mom's cheek. "So, celebrating our speaker?" He set down the bottle, then studied me. "We thought Sienna could smooth the entry. 2 minutes. Takes pressure off." I looked at the three of them on one side of the room. My mother, my father, my sister, and felt that old equation trying to reassert itself. Sienna has the charm. Lena has the brain. Together they make one complete daughter. I was 30, not 12 at a recital with a bench suddenly shared. "No," I said. "This time it's just me." Something in the air shifted. A drop in pressure before a storm. Sienna's smile thinned. Mom's fingers tapped the tablecloth. Dad's jaw set. I remembered the last time I let them decide my spotlight. I remembered how small that made me. I took a breath that reached all the way down. "I've been working with a speaking coach. I've practiced. I'm fine." My voice didn't shake. Maybe for the first time, it sounded like it belonged to a woman who knew how to hold a room. Dinner moved forward the way our family always moves forward. Pretending disagreement is just another seasoning. Sienna talked about a dress being tailored in deep sapphire. Mom floated names of donors like they were cousins. Dad mentioned seating charts and photographers as if he were on the planning committee. I ate 3 bites and counted the ways they'd already written me out of my own moment. When I got home, I set the portfolio on my desk and opened my laptop to confirm the final run of show from the gala. A new subject line waited like a bright bruise near the top of my inbox. RE, Global Relief Alliance. Contingency plan for keynote. My stomach dropped before I even clicked. The email opened, and there it was. My sister's message to the organizers. My mother copied. My father chiming in below. All so neat and reasonable. "If Lena gets nervous," Sienna had written, "I'm happy to step up and complete the presentation so the audience leaves inspired." I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred. Then I scrolled. It wasn't the first email. It wasn't even the 10th. At the bottom of the thread, a calendar invitation pulsed in bold. "Sound check S. Heart. Not me. Sienna. I felt my pulse sharpen into something clear and bright. They weren't planning to help me. They were planning to replace me. If this kind of family drama hits home, like, share, and subscribe so more people walk into their spotlight on their own terms. Because trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. The morning after that dinner, I opened my inbox with a knot in my chest. The subject line still glared at me. RE, Global Relief Alliance, Contingency Plan for Keynote. My finger hovered before I clicked, and when the thread expanded, my worst fear hardened into truth. There was Sienna, typing to the event coordinator with her trademark breezy confidence. "Lena is brilliant," she wrote, "but she sometimes freezes in front of large crowds. If she stumbles, I'd be honored to step in so the evening doesn't fall flat." Below, my mother's email chimed in like clockwork. "Absolutely, we agree. The girls are strongest together." Then, my father. "Yes, let's ensure donors feel entertained. Sienna knows how to command a room." My name was right there, reduced to a risk factor, an afterthought, a liability to be managed. My throat burned. Months of preparation, erased by 3 sentences and a carbon copy. I searched my inbox with shaking hands. More results flooded the screen. Emails to the University of Chicago Alumni Board, to a policy roundtable in Washington. Each time, Sienna had inserted herself. Each time, my parents had nodded along, as if my life's work was only credible when packaged with her charm. By the time I walked into the office, my phone was buzzing nonstop. A colleague caught me in the break room, holding her latte like it was a microphone. "I didn't know your sister was speaking with you at the gala." "That's so sweet she's helping." "You must be relieved." I forced a smile. "Actually, I'm the keynote." "Just me." She blinked, clearly doubtful, and that doubt spread like spilled ink. Whispers followed me down the hallway. "Her family pulled strings. She's not really a speaker type." Each fragment stabbed deeper. Then, at 3 o'clock sharp, my desk phone rang. "Lena," my boss's voice was oddly formal, "could you step into my office?" I walked in, clutching my notepad. He gestured for me to sit. "I got a call this morning. From your mother." My ears rang. "She called you. She suggested your sister might be a better fit to represent the family at certain events." I was surprised. "The invitation was for you, for your research." He studied me, waiting for an explanation. Heat flooded my face. "It's not a family spot. It's my work, my analysis. They didn't ask for her. They asked for me." He nodded slowly, but I could see the shadow of uncertainty in his eyes. My credibility was slipping through my fingers, and they hadn't even given me the chance to stand on stage yet. That evening, I scrolled again through the email thread. Every line of it another twist of the knife. At the very bottom, a detail I'd missed earlier made my breath catch. Wasn't just Sienna offering to fill in. Attached was a draft program schedule. Polished, official-looking, stamped with the Global Relief Alliance logo. And in bold letters it read, "Keynote, Dr. Sienna Hart." For a moment I thought my eyes were lying. But no, it was there, in black and white. They hadn't just planted the idea. They had already convinced someone. And in that instant, one question consumed me. When the spotlight finally turns on, will I still be the one standing under it? By Monday morning, the storm had moved beyond my inbox. I walked into the office with my head high, clutching my coffee like it was armor. But before I could even set it down, I heard laughter bubbling from the marketing pod. "Did you see Sienna's reel?" one of them whispered. I opened my phone, and there it was. Her smiling in a boutique mirror, twirling in a sapphire gown. The caption read, "Getting ready to help my brilliant sister shine at the Global Relief Alliance Gala. Can't wait to take the stage with her." Thousands of views, hundreds of likes. Even our local business journal reposted it with the headline, Sisters to Co-Host $90 million Relief Gala. My name was buried in the second paragraph, overshadowed by Sienna's photo. By lunch, my reputation was being rewritten in real time. Karen from accounting passed me in the hall and said, "You must be so glad Sienna will be there to calm your nerves. Not everyone's cut out for the big stage. I bit my tongue so hard, I tasted copper. It wasn't just a family issue anymore. My professional world, the one I'd built from nothing, was starting to doubt me." That afternoon, my boss called me back into his office. He slid his phone across the desk. A series of glossy emails from the charity's PR team glowed on the screen. My father had been in touch with them too. He'd pitched a dual narrative about family values. Even suggested renaming my speech to include Sienna's unique charisma. I felt the ground shift. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was a campaign, a slow erasure of me, orchestrated by the people who were supposed to protect me. When I got home, I tossed my heels into the closet and reached for my spare key. Only, it wasn't there. The little ceramic dish on my shelf was empty. My stomach knotted. I checked my bag, the kitchen counter, even under the sofa cushions. Nothing. Someone had taken it. I froze in the doorway, scanning my apartment with new eyes. The cushions on my couch were shifted. A faint trace of Sienna's perfume lingered in the air. My sanctuary had been breached. A single thought burned behind my ribs. If they could walk into my home, what else were they willing to take? I closed the blinds, slid the chain across the door, and leaned against it, breathing hard. The humiliation at work was one thing, but this was different. This was personal. And as the city lights flickered on outside my window, I couldn't help but wonder, if they had my key, what had they touched? What had they already changed? That night, I could not shake the feeling that something was off. The missing key gnawed at me, so I pulled up the security camera feed from the hallway outside my apartment. My breath caught in my throat. There she was, Sienna, slipping in with a flash of her emerald heels. And she was not alone. A young man in a black polo, the kind the event staff wore, held the door open for her. He carried a garment bag over one shoulder, and the two of them whispered before disappearing into my place. I slammed my laptop shut, then opened it again, heart racing. I clicked through the footage. They had been in my apartment for nearly 30 minutes. What had they done? I hurried from room to room, flipping on lights, scanning every surface. The scent of her perfume was stronger in the bedroom. That is when I saw it. My presentation materials were no longer in their neat order. Pages had been shuffled, sections highlighted with Sienna's looping handwriting in pink ink. She had circled statistics, drawn arrows, and even added transitions in her own words. She had turned my work into her script. I sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching the pages. For a moment, my chest tightened, until it was hard to breathe. The invasion was worse than the emails, worse than the whispers at the office. This was my home, my sanctuary, and she had walked in as if it were hers. The door creaked again. I shot up, heart pounding. Sienna's voice floated down the hallway, casual, like this was all normal. Just dropping off a few outfit options, Lena. You left the spare key in the same spot you did in college. You really should change that. She stepped into the bedroom, laid the garment bag across my chair, and smiled at me, like she was doing me a favor. I looked through your slides, she said. I highlighted the parts you should emphasize. And I added some openings that will charm the donors. Trust me, they'll love it. My fingers tightened around the papers. You had no right. She waved it off, unfazed. You'll thank me later. Without me, you're going to bore them. Then she breezed out, her perfume trailing like smoke. The click of her heels fading into silence. I spent hours reconstructing my work, trying to remember which chart came where, which quote anchored which section. Every time I thought I had it fixed, doubt wormed in. What if she was right? What if I froze? What if I needed her? At 2 a.m, exhausted, I opened my inbox again. That was when I saw it. A new message. No subject line. From an anonymous address. Just one sentence in stark black letters. If you want to keep your stage, do not save their face that night. I stared, pulse pounding in my ears. Someone out there knew exactly what was happening inside my family. Someone wanted me to let the humiliation unfold. But who? A colleague? A donor? Or the very staffer who had followed Sienna into my apartment? I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the screen washing over me, and realized the game was no longer confined to our dinner table. The battlefield had expanded, and I had no idea who was fighting beside me or against me. By dawn, I had made my choice. Fear was no longer my compass. Strategy was. I walked into my office on Michigan Avenue, locked the door behind me, and spread both versions of my presentation on the conference table. Every page Sienna had touched glowed with pink ink like an infection. I slid them into a separate folder, then built a clean, uncorrupted deck from my original files. This version I printed twice, sealed one copy in an envelope, and placed it inside the company safe. The other I tucked into my leather portfolio. Then I called the Global Relief Alliance. When Eleanor's brisk voice came through the line, I laid it all out. I need confirmation that no one, under any circumstances, will be permitted to speak in my slot. I'm the keynote. No substitutions. She hesitated, then lowered her tone. Dr. Hart, are you telling me there's been interference? I thought about the anonymous email, about the camera footage of Sienna with that staffer. My instinct was to hand everything over, to let Eleanor see the betrayal for what it was. But another thought slashed through me. If I exposed them now, the scandal would scorch not just my parents, but the donors tied to them. If the story leaked, the Gala could collapse, and the very communities I wanted to help would lose millions in funding. So I swallowed the evidence. Let's just say there's been confusion. A wristband system, strictly enforced, would put my mind at ease. By the end of the call, she had agreed. Authorized presenters only. Color-coded access bands. My place at the podium was secured, on paper at least. That evening, I returned to my apartment to find a package waiting on the welcome mat. Inside was my original gown. At first, relief washed over me, until I saw it. A thin, deliberate slit running along the seam, right where the stage lights would hit. A sabotage, so subtle it could be dismissed as an accident, yet devastating enough to unravel me in front of 900 donors. I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound that startled even me. They thought I would crumble over fabric. They underestimated how many times I had stitched myself back together after their cuts. I pulled out my backup dress, a deep burgundy sheath I had bought months ago on clearance, almost as a joke. Now it hung perfectly, understated and strong. Not a gown that begged for attention, but one that demanded respect. As I admired my reflection, my phone buzzed. The car service I had booked confirmed my ride for Gala night. Then a second buzz, a text from the driver. Your family is asking about alternate entrances. Should I share? My hand tightened around the phone. They were already circling, planning to storm the back doors, maybe even the green room. My heart hammered, but I felt no panic this time. Because now I had leverage. I had the footage. I had the anonymous ally who seemed to know more than they should. And for the first time, I wondered if I let my family walk into their own trap, would I finally be free? The choice loomed, sharp as the scissors that had sliced through my gown. And I knew that Gala night would be nothing like they imagined. The night of the gala arrived, draped in glitter and expectation. Chicago's skyline glowed against the lake, the Global Relief Alliance banners fluttering in the September wind. My driver opened the door, and I stepped out in the burgundy dress, portfolio clutched tight, the city's hum vibrating in my chest. I had promised myself I would walk through those doors alone, and I did. Inside, crystal chandeliers lit a sea of gowns and tuxedos. Conversations buzzed in polished tones, champagne flutes caught the light, and the air smelled of roses and ambition. Eleanor greeted me near the marble staircase, her handshake firm, her eyes steady. She slipped the green wristband over my wrist. "This grants you stage access. No one else," she whispered. It felt like armor sliding into place. But before I could take a full breath, a commotion rippled near the entrance. Sienna. She swept in with our parents at her side, emerald dress shimmering under the lights, her smile already calibrated for cameras. She glided toward the velvet rope at the stage entrance, arm looped with the same event staffer from the hallway footage. "I'm part of the program," she declared, flashing a printed copy of the draft agenda. "I'm the keynote speaker." The guard held up a hand. "Green wristbands only, ma'am." "That must be a mistake." Sienna's tone sharpened. "My family expects me on stage." From across the ballroom, I could feel dozens of eyes shifting, watching the scene unfold. Donors whispered behind sequined fans, phones tilted upward to record. Father's hand sliced the air, his voice rising. "She's introducing her sister." That was always the plan. Eleanor's heels clicked against the marble as she strode over. Her face was calm, but her voice carried steel. "I'm afraid the program is final. Only Dr. Lena Hart has access." Sienna's smile faltered. For the first time in years, her charm did not open a door. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, my stomach twisted. The anonymous warning pulsed in my head. Do not save their face. I could step forward, smooth things over, tell the donors it was all a misunderstanding. I could protect my family's reputation even now. Then, the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone twice. The chatter fell silent. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we gather for a cause greater than ourselves. It is my honor to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Lena Hart." Applause erupted. Eleanor touched my arm gently, guiding me toward the stage. But just as I reached the steps, another voice cut through the clapping. My mother's, sharp, unyielding. "This is our family's event. It was my idea from the very beginning." Her words cracked like glass across the hall. Gasps rose from the front rows. I froze, one heel on the step, the other still on the marble floor. The spotlight swung toward me, but half the crowd was already staring at her, at the matriarch who had just claimed my achievement as her own. For a heartbeat, I felt that old pull, to shrink, to let them rewrite my story. But tonight, the script was mine. I straightened, the green wristband tight on my wrist, and wondered if I should finally expose everything. Emails, footage, sabotage, or let her unravel herself in front of the city's elite. The choice hung in the air, and I took the last step toward the podium. The podium lights blinded me for half a second, but instead of shrinking, I let the warmth settle on my face. My name still echoed in the air, and for once, it wasn't followed by my sisters. The applause rolled like thunder, shaking the crystal glasses on the tables. I placed my portfolio on the stand, opened the clean copy of my presentation, and breathed. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear, stronger than it had ever been. "My name is Dr. Lena Hart. Tonight, I want to talk about what happens when we stop treating economic growth as numbers on a spreadsheet and start seeing it as the lifeblood of real families, real futures." The room leaned in, I guided them through years of research, the models I had built late into the night, the case studies of struggling communities now thriving because of data-driven funding. Charts lit up the screen behind me, every line and figure my own. I no longer apologized for being technical. I translated complexity into stories that mattered, stories of families who had been invisible, now visible. For a while, the crowd disappeared, and it was just me and the truth. I was no longer the girl at the piano waiting for permission. I was the conductor. Halfway through, I glanced toward the family table. My father's smile had stiffened, his hand frozen around his wine glass. My mother's lips pressed into a line so thin it could have vanished. Sienna, radiant in her emerald gown, clapped too early, desperate to draw eyes back to herself. I pressed on. Sustainable growth is not built on charm or connections, I said, meeting the gaze of a row of executives scribbling notes. It is built on merit, on research, and on the courage to let the right voices lead. Applause burst out again, louder this time. A silver-haired woman from the Alliance Board rose from her seat. "Please," she called out firmly, "let Dr. Hart finish." The entire ballroom shifted, all attention returning to me. Sienna sank back into her chair, her cheeks flushed crimson. The speech ended with a standing ovation. I felt the vibration of hundreds of people clapping, their eyes on me, not on the family that had tried to script me out. As I stepped away from the podium, donors surged forward, business cards in hand. A representative from a global bank leaned close, his voice low. "We need your model for our Latin America program." Another whispered, "Your framework could change our Africa initiative." For the first time, the room saw me. Not Sienna, not my parents, me. But then, just as the crowd pressed closer, a young man in a black polo slipped toward the side of the stage. I recognized him instantly, the staffer who had walked Sienna into my apartment. His eyes found mine, and he hesitated, as if deciding whether to speak. Then he pulled out his phone, tapped the microphone app, and handed it to Eleanor. A few minutes later, as I shook hands with an ambassador, I caught the flicker of a video playing on a tablet near the organizer's table. My chest tightened. The hallway footage, Sienna entering my apartment with him, her voice, clear as a bell, floated across the speakers. "If she messes this up, I'll fix it." Donors don't want numbers. They want me. Gasps scattered through the crowd. Heads turned. My mother's face drained of color. Sienna's eyes widened, her hand frozen on her wine glass. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed in my clutch. A message from my father appeared on the screen. "If you don't stand up right now and correct this, your mother's career is finished." The ovation still thundered around me, but my pulse was louder. I stood in the center of the room, caught between triumph and betrayal, staring at the message that demanded I choose between protecting myself or saving the very people who tried to erase me. The applause was still echoing in my ears when I stepped away from the podium, clutching my portfolio like it was both weapon and shield. My phone buzzed again. Father's text burned on the screen, the words heavy with command. "Fix this. If you don't, your mother's career is finished." For a second, my breath caught, because I knew what he meant. The donors were watching, whispering. If the footage spread, the polished image my parents had built over decades could collapse in one night. I looked up. Across the ballroom, Sienna sat frozen, emerald silk shimmering under the chandeliers, her perfect smile shattered into something raw and jagged. My mother's hand clutched at her pearls, her lips moving in frantic whispers to anyone who would listen. Father's jaw clenched, eyes drilling into mine like a silent order. And in that moment, I faced the question that had haunted me my whole life. Was I willing to step back, to cover for them once again, to sacrifice my own truth so they could remain untarnished? Or was I ready to let the world see them exactly as they were? I closed my eyes for the briefest breath. Then I turned to the waiting reporters. "Everything you heard tonight," I said, my voice steady, "was mine. Every chart, every projection, every story. I will not apologize for finally standing in my own light." I paused, then let the words land. "And I will not correct the record for those who tried to take that away." The silence that followed was deafening, sharper than any applause. Cameras clicked, pens scratched, and then, slowly, as if a wave had passed through the room, the clapping began again, stronger, steadier, undeniable. My father's face flushed crimson. My mother's hand fell from her pearls. Sienna lowered her eyes, for once, without a comeback. 6 months later, the world looked different. I stood in a glass-walled conference room in New York, the skyline stretching behind me, and introduced a panel of international economists. My calendar was packed with summits, consultations, and publications. The very people who once doubted me now quoted my research, invited me to advise, asked for my signature on initiatives that would shape policy across continents. At home, the boundaries I had drawn stood like steel. My parents called less often, and when they did, their tone had changed. No more commands disguised as advice. No more casual reminders of Sienna's supposed superiority. They spoke carefully, cautiously, as if they finally understood that my silence was no longer weakness, but choice. Sienna, though, remained a shadow at the edge of my life. She had moved to Los Angeles, chasing a new stage, a new spotlight. Occasionally, I saw her face on social media, smiling next to some new investor, but the likes had dwindled. Her aura of invincibility had cracked the night the footage played at the Gala. For the first time, the world had seen her not as the flawless star, but as a woman willing to betray her own sister. And yet, when I sat in my office late one evening, flipping through the framed photo Aunt Claire had given me at the podium, hand lifted mid-sentence, light pooling around me, I felt something unexpected, not gloating, not vengeance, sadness, a grief for the family that could have been, for the sister who never believed I could stand without her. Weeks later, another invitation arrived, this time from the World Economic Forum, a keynote on sustainable growth models, all expenses covered, front page of the program. The validation felt sweet, but it was not what made me smile. What mattered was knowing that even without my family's approval, I had proven to myself that my voice was enough. The following Sunday, I found myself at Aunt Claire's garden apartment. She poured champagne, the bubbles rising in the glasses like tiny bursts of laughter. Dr. Reynolds brought an elaborate cheese board, and Eleanor raised a toast. "To Lena," she said, "for teaching us that standing tall is more powerful than any borrowed introduction." We clinked glasses. For the first time in years, I felt light. I did not need to perform, did not need to guard my work against wandering hands. I was seen, respected, and finally, free. Still, when my phone buzzed, I glanced at the screen. It was my mother. She had called 3 times that week. This time, her voice was softer, uncertain. "Lena," she said, "your father and I were wondering, could we attend your next local lecture? We'd like to hear you." I paused. The younger version of me would have leapt at the chance, desperate for their approval. But the woman I had become simply held the phone, listening to her mother stumble through words she had never spoken before. "We're proud of you," she said finally, and then fell silent, waiting. I did not answer right away, because forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It is about deciding how much of yourself you are willing to risk again. As I looked out over the city lights glittering below, I realized something. Revenge had never been about destroying them. It was about refusing to let them destroy me. So here is the truth I carry now. You can love your family, you can even forgive them, but you do not have to live in their shadow. Strength is not silence. Power is not control. And dignity, real dignity, comes when you claim your place, when you walk into your own light, and when you choose to keep walking forward, even if it means leaving others behind. Because in the end, the sweetest revenge is not their downfall. It is your freedom. It is the life you build, brighter and truer, once you stop waiting for permission and start writing your own story. Tell me, if it were your family standing at that gala door, demanding your spotlight, would you have stepped aside to protect them? Or would you have finally stepped forward to protect yourself?